Hey YouTube, thought I'd run you through the procedure I use on my brass. Even on brand new brass, has not been fired yet. I got this at a bargain. I know it's not the most expensive brass and the most consistent, but you can make it very functional, very usable by just running through a few procedures. Most people that are doing any type of accurate shooting will do similar procedures on their brass regardless of the brand. So I just want to show you what I do. Start out, in order to do any of the other operations, or at least the neck turning, which we'll get into later, first thing you need to do is expand it to the proper diameter. And I have a K&M Pilot expander mounted in my press, and this expands it to the right diameter to use the K&M neck turner, which we'll get into in just a minute. So the first thing you need to do is expand it. Next thing I do is the primer pocket hole. I want to uniform that, make sure it's the consistent depth, consistent diameter, and I have a K&M primer pocket uniformer mounted on my drill driver here. Just insert it, give it a few turns, and you'll see it does trim out the base of the primer pocket there, so that we get a consistent depth, because they're not all the same depth as they come from the factory because of the forming process. These are pressed out, and they're kind of rounded over in the bottom of the primer pocket, so we want to get rid of that where it's consistent for each piece of brass. Now we want to chuck it up. Next thing I like to do is cut it to length. Again, I use my Lee trimmer, case length trimmer. I've added excuse me, this wooden knob to it just for ergonomics. It fits my hand better. You just insert it, give it a few turns until it quits cutting. It stops automatically at the proper depth for 308. This is specific for the 308, so it cuts them all to the same depth. Now we can do the case neck turning to get to a consistent thickness on the case neck. This ensures you get a more consistent crimp from bullet to bullet, because from the factory these can vary quite a lot in thickness, so we want to get it to a consistent thickness. And I've already got mine set for the 308. It has a 308 Pilot in it. You want to keep this Pilot lubricated, and you want to turn it at a low speed also. So we'll show you how this process goes here. You can hear the drill driver slowing down a little bit as it cuts. You can tell that it's not consistent neck thickness. And you want to slowly just run it back and forth a couple of times to make sure you got all the ridges and high spots cut down. And that's it. Take the brass out. You should be able to see here now that there are still some discolored places on the brass where the cutter did not take it down. That's because that particular part of the brass was not as thick as the other. But you can, where it's shiny, that's where we cut it down to where it's mostly the same thickness now all the way around. It doesn't have quite as much variation. You don't want to take it down necessarily to where all of it is cut. That may make it too thin. So you just want to be careful, get a happy average here that works for you. Generally, depending on the piece of brass, this takes between 75 and 80%. It cuts it down 75 to 80% of the neck, but still going to have some of these dark spots, and these are spots that are not quite as thick as the other. You want to get as consistent as you can, but there is a point of diminishing returns there on taking the brass down. Now I'm going to chuck it back up. Want to uniform the primer pocket hole. This is by Lyman, I believe is the brand here. Yes, I've worn it off of that one, but it's a Lyman primer pocket uniformer. Insert it, got adjustable depth, and right there I can feel it won't turn past that point, which means that the primer pocket is not uniform in this piece of brass. So I take it and just turn it till it turns easily, because those primer pocket flash holes are just punched. So a lot of times, and they're punched from the base up into the cartridge, so a lot of times it leaves ragged edges where it punches that hole through the flash hole through the brass primer pocket. So this makes it a uniform diameter and also trims off any burrs or anything. You can see, that'll focus, you can see that's what was cut out of that primer pocket hole, those little filings right there. So the other thing this does, when that primer pocket hole is uniform from one piece of brass to the next, the flame front coming out of that primer as it's going in is the same size each time. It's not restricted by anything in the flash hole once you do this, so you get more consistent ignition of the powder as the flame from the primer goes up into the powder, into the brass. That's consistent from time to time, so you get more consistent velocities, more consistent ignition of that powder, and consistency is the key to accuracy. That's what we're going for here. Now, we've got it trimmed to length, we've got the case neck turned, we've got the primer pocket uniformed, and the flash hole deburred and uniformed. Now I just want to do a quick few turns here to get a taper on the inside of that neck. This helps the bullet to see easier and also prevents the brass from cutting into the side of the bullet as the bullet is being seated. Do the same thing for the outside of the neck here, and that's to get the burr off of there that's been formed by the other operation, so that that's smooth now. You won't get any restriction as you're putting that into your chamber. So everything is smooth now. We've got that brass uniformed. We just have to repeat that for every piece of brass we've got now. So that's what I do for my brass in preparation for reloading. Research what works for your rifle, what works for your particular load. This is what works for mine. You do this, you're going to get more consistent velocities. When you get more consistent velocities and you find the load that your gun likes, you're going to get more consistent accuracy. Accuracy is the name of the game, and to get accuracy you have to have consistency in all of your preparation steps for reloading. Take care, be safe, have fun, shoot often. See you later.